Today I figured I'd make a video talking about the pros and cons of hourly versus load pay. And if you're not familiar with load pay, it's essentially you're paid a set rate for a particular load by the mile, and that way it's going to be the same every time, or you get a percentage of what that load pays. When delivering fuel, it's pretty common to either be paid hourly or by the load. There's some companies that pay differently. Not really sure. Like I can only speak on what I'm familiar with. When it comes to hourly pay, some companies vary by how they pay you. With the company I work for right now, you're paid, you clock in and clock out. So you're paid from the time you clock in to the time you clock out, obviously, and all the time in between. Some companies only pay you by your logbook. So they'll look at your logbook, add your drive time and your on-duty not driving time together, and that's what you're paid for. So if you go off duty, for instance, to take a break or something like that, you're not compensated for it under that type of pay structure when it comes to hourly. So anyway, I'm going to talk about what our company pays, and it's hourly from the time you clock in to the time you clock out. Now, that clock in and clock out has to line up with what your logbook says. So anyway, that's beside the point. I just want to say that because the first pro that I have for hourly pay is that you're paid for everything you do. So as long as you're paid from the time you clock in to the time you clock out, and it doesn't matter if you go off duty, sleeper berth, on duty, or driving, you're paid either way, then you are paid for everything that you do. When you stop to fuel the truck, if you stop to take a break, whatever, you're paid for it. Number two, I say drivers in theory should drive safer when paid hourly. The reason I say in theory and that they should drive safer is that usually hourly drivers have a bit of an incentive to drive a little bit slower or take their time on what they're doing versus being paid by the load. We'll talk about that. Anyway, and there's also so I say drivers in theory should drive safer because I do know a few drivers that even though they're hourly, they always get in a hurry no matter what. It doesn't matter if they're hourly, load pay. They're just one of those drivers that is going to be in a hurry no matter what, no matter how they're paid. I would say the number three pro, honestly, I don't have a whole lot of pros for hourly pay. You know, I mean, the paid for everything you do, that's why it's number one, because you're paid for everything that you do. So when it comes to all right, so number three for hourly is you have less potential for mistakes. And what I mean by that is that's more of a company side, that whenever you pay your drivers hourly, it gives them an incentive to, again, slow down. And, you know, one, they're going to drive a little bit safer usually. Two, they're going to pay more attention as far as they're going to take their time when they're unloading or loading the truck. You have less potential for a cross drop. You have less potential for, you know, just something going wrong. So, I'm going to go back to number one because that's the end of my list for pros to hourly pay. I like being paid by the hour, but as we'll talk about when it comes to load pay, there is potential you can make more money on load pay, but I'll get to that. I'm going to go back to number one on pros of hourly is you're paid for everything. You're paid for everything that you do, and what I mean is, like, as far as it comes in handy. Hourly pay comes in handy. Not so much for me as far as, like, I'm not trying to brag, but I'm all about being efficient and not rushing when I'm delivering or loading or anything like that. I just like to be efficient. I do things to save time. So someone like me, I can run 6 or even possibly even 7 loads here in Jacksonville. I could run 7 locals in a 12 to 14 hour period. Usually it's going to be a 14-hour period with Most of our local loads averaging 2 hours apiece. So for me, hourly, I don't have much incentive to run a lot of loads, and that's kind of one of the cons that I'm going to talk about soon. All right, so number one pro of hourly is that you're paid for everything you do. Fueling the truck, if there's a delay when you get to the rack to get loaded, you get to your customer where you're going to unload and there's something in the way, you want to get the load delivered, but you're not as in much of a hurry, or you're not rushing as much. It's kind of like, okay, whatever, it's, I'm still getting paid while I wait for them to move or whatever. The biggest con, in my opinion, to hourly pay is more of a company side, as far as you're going to have drivers who deliberately milk the clock. They're going to run slower, they're going to do things slower, they're going to stop multiple times to get food or whatever. They're going to find ways to get more hours while producing less work. And unfortunately, for a company, they're like a parasite. But if you pay hourly, I've found out, especially in hauling fuel, you pay hourly, there are going to be those people that put in the minimum effort. They want to do the minimum while getting paid the maximum. Unfortunately, that's just the way it goes. It's the way she goes, boys. Number two for cons of hourly pay, and I would say, is there's no real incentive to run more loads. There's no incentive to do more work. And that kind of goes back to number one of people milking the clock and leeching money off of the company, because they don't have any real reason to run more loads. If I can come in and work 12 hours and run 4 loads while another guy's, he's running 12 hours and only running 2 loads, well, he's taking his time, he's doing all that. Well, then what does that show me? Like, oh, maybe I should take my time. Then it just kind of rolls downhill from there, because then people are like, well, I'm getting paid the same as this guy, but I'm doing more work. Why? I have no incentive to keep doing more work. Number 3 for cons of hourly pay, and I would say, is that you're not always paid overtime. Freaking gnats. You're not always paid overtime. And that may be foreign. If you're not in the trucking industry, that may sound very foreign. It's like, whoa, no, you got to get overtime after 40 hours. In the trucking industry, I believe it's drivers and mechanics are exempt from the labor laws that say you have to pay overtime after 40 hours. I say that with the overtime because we deliver to a customer who, it's an LTL company, and I've talked with their mechanics, and that's what they do, is they only pay straight time. They do not pay overtime. None of their mechanics get overtime, and it's perfectly legal. You don't have to agree with it, and in my opinion, if you don't agree with it, don't work for them. If you want overtime, work for a company that pays overtime. Number 4 for cons of hourly pay is scrutiny for what you do. And this kind of goes back to the driver that stops a lot and does, waste time, things like that. If you start to look at their logbook, and companies will do this, I mean, our company has done this for certain drivers that were just deliberately, they were letting stores run out because they were stopping so much and just wasting time. Being paid by the hour, you're gonna get scrutinized a lot more, as far as there are some companies that they get down to micromanaging you so much, where if you stop somewhere to get food, you might get a call from your dispatcher saying, hey, why are you stopping? You're on your way to a store, why are you stopping? Well, I wanted to get some food. Well, why not get food whenever you get to the store? Something like that. It in my opinion, hourly pay, it opens you up to that as a company driver, because they're paying you by the hour, and even though you're being paid by the hour, it doesn't always mean that you can just do whatever you want and you're still going to get paid. They can scrutinize what you do with that time that they're paying you. At the end of the video, I'll give which one I prefer, hourly versus load pay. All right, so let's go on to the pros for load pay. The pros for load pay is you have a potential to make more money. And what I mean by that is the quicker you are and the more efficient you are at getting onto the next load, not necessarily rushing to get to that next load, but just being efficient. That's something I pride myself on, is you do things, you're not cutting corners or anything like that. You have just, over the years, and as your experience grows, you learn what you can and can't do in order to save a little bit of time here, save a little bit of time there. So you have potential to make more if you can run and or if you can knock out more loads and you're efficient at getting onto that next load, getting it in the ground, and just, you know, rolling. You have an incentive. That's kind of number two. You have an incentive to run more loads. The more loads you do, the more money you're going to make, and the quicker that you can do those loads, you can kind of average it out to where you're making more money per hour versus if you were just paid by the hour like I am now. One of the main cons for load-based pay is the exact opposite of the pro for hourly pay, is you're not paid for everything that you do. Fueling the truck or loading the truck, unloading the truck, stuff like that, you're not paid for it. Now some companies, they will pay you if you have to go from one terminal to another. You would get a bump, or like a split terminal pay or a split delivery pay, something like that. But as far as apples to apples with hourly and load pay, you're not paid for everything that you do versus the hourly pay. You know, so I'd say that's number one con. The number two con for load-based pay is you're kind of, if you get delayed, you're kind of counting on demurrage pay to make up for that. Now, most companies, at least for hauling fuel or local, they pay after 1 hour. After 1 hour, because most of the loads, they consider it, you have 1 hour delivery. After 1 hour, then you would start getting an hourly rate of, let's say our company is load-based pay, you get $20 after the first hour. So you're getting paid for delivering that load, but if you get held up somewhere, or you get delayed, if you get to a rack where you're waiting after 1 hour, then you can start collecting, you know, like say every 15 minutes, every quarter of an hour, you're getting, you know, X amount of money. So that's kind of something that you know, it's something you would have to keep track of to make sure you get paid for it, make sure it goes to the correct people, so that your company does pay you for it, stuff like that. It's more of a hassle versus being hourly. You know you're getting paid. So I would say the third con for load-based pay is unfortunately you're more of in a hurry. I'd say some people. I know I was. When the first company I went to work for hauling fuel, I was paid by the load, and so you're kind of, you want to get unloaded and get onto that next load. I have, and I was going to say, being in a hurry under load-based pay, you have a greater chance of making a mistake. I've made mistakes. I had a cross drop. I dropped regular into a premium tank. Luckily, that was an easy fix, as far as they sent a driver there, pumped the premium tank over to the regular, and then dumped fresh premium in the tank, you know, and our company just had to pay for the fresh premium and whatever, things like that. I've made mistakes, and I can tell you, I can honestly say that yes, I was in a hurry, I was rushing because I was paid by the load. There's pros and cons to both hourly and load pay. In my opinion, the biggest con to hourly pay, of course, is you're going to have drivers milking the clock, costing a company more money. With load pay, it might save you a little bit of money, but then you also have drivers that are going to get in a hurry. They may screw up and cost you a lot of money in fixing mistakes such as cross drops or you know, accidents because they're driving too fast or rushing down the highway, things like that. So hopefully this video helps a little bit. Trying to rush through everything, well, not rush through everything, but it is very crappy weather right now. The rain quit for a little while. Figured I'd make this video and talk a little bit about hourly versus load pay, especially when it comes to hauling fuel, because that is a very it's a very common thing to either be paid by the load or by hourly when it comes to hauling fuel. I talked about the pros and cons of hourly versus load pay. What I prefer, honestly, I prefer load pay, because over the years, I'm not trying to brag, but I do have experience. I have 7 years of experience hauling fuel, and in October it'll be 8 years. 10 years driving total, and then 8 years hauling fuel. I know how to be efficient. I'm not gonna say I'll never screw up again, I'll never have a cross drop again. You know, it's not just a never say never, but it's you get complacent, and that's how I screwed up in the first place, or the first time, you know, 6.5 years ago. Is I got complacent, thought I knew everything, found out real quick I didn't know everything at all. So anyway, that's what I prefer. I prefer load pay, or load-based pay, being paid a percentage of what the load pays the company. And of course, when I move to owner-operator, I'll be paid percentage. And I strongly believe that that is the best way to pay for fuel. Not everyone's going to agree with me. I understand that. Maybe load pay isn't the greatest if you haul fuel in Atlanta, where you're gonna, you might have traffic jams every, multiple times a day. But here in Jacksonville, traffic isn't that bad. You can run, multiple loads a day. And in my opinion, load-based pay is the best way to go. And again, not everyone's going to agree with that, and that's okay. We don't have to agree on everything. There are some companies here in Jacksonville who switch from load-based pay or load pay to hourly, but my personal feeling is load pay is better, only because one, the more efficient you are, the quicker you're able to get the loads done, the more money you can make. You can get on to that next load. And also it cuts down on other drivers leeching money off of the company because they're hourly. You make as much money as you put into the job, versus hourly is anybody. If you're out here, you run 2 or 3 loads and say, oh well, I'm out of time, I'm gonna head on home. You ran 3 loads in 12 hours, I ran 6 loads in 12 hours, and we got paid the same. So in my opinion, that's kind of where load pay comes in handy. And just to me, is I'm getting paid for what I do, and the other guy that slacks off, well, he's getting paid for what he does on load pay. But anyway, I'm gonna get out of here. It is, I think it's like 4 or 5 o'clock in the afternoon. I don't know. Anyway, I'm gonna get out of here before it starts raining again. Today's been really, really crappy. By the way, with my truck in the background, if you don't know who I'm trying to imitate right now, maybe check out this channel called Driven Trucking. Just giving him a shout out. Brian puts out a lot of good, awesome videos, and he does a lot of videos where he's talking to the camera in front of his truck, so I'm just kind of not mocking him. It's more of like a tip of my hat to him, that's all. But anyway, I'm gonna head on home, and yeah, that's pretty much it for today before it starts raining again. Oh, so fucking stupid. So, today, I was gonna... I hate this. I haven't made a video in so long. Why? Why do I care? Why do I do the things I do? A video. Today I figured I'd make a video talking about. Alright, so. Of course, the wind has to be a dick. I have my camera sitting on my car. I have a $26,000 tripod. Is it a tripod if it's a car? I don't think so. Anyway.